Anybody that started growing food this year, stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year. I'll go first. I am not going to plant anything else without labeling it, because I did that this year and it was awful. If y'all remember the watermelons, yeah, not doing that again. Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
Hey sis, so I'm not doing garlic. I did garlic for 3 years. It never grows right, and I'll just get it from the farmer's market. It's one of those things that, like, I got onions, broccoli, herbs. Like, I even grew a red cabbage. I cannot grow garlic, so I'm just gonna get it from the farmer's market, and I'm okay with that. I'm not good with certain things, and that's one of them. Happy New Year!
Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
So that lady was basically just asking beginner gardeners what they want to be doing in their gardens next year. For me, it is not planting food that I don't like or eat just to see it grow. It's a problem.
Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
Alright, it's about to be seed starting time, so I hope you guys hear this. There's 2 things I won't be doing. I won't be starting seeds in these egg cartons. There's no upside at all to this. There's not enough room for the seedlings, for the roots. And it also was moldy, yet the water kept wicking away from the plants because of the cardboard. I'm not going to do it. It was a mess. I'm also not going to mess with my pepper plants. I'm not going to top them. I'm not going to cut them. I'm just going to leave them alone. It just seemed to stunt them. I don't have a long enough growing season. There's actually a YouTube channel that did an experiment in 2021 with 74 plants, and they did all the math, and they just found it wasn't worth it to prune in the end. It's called The Ripe Tomato Farms, and it does match up with my experience. As a beginner, it was really confusing seeing all the stuff about topping and pruning. In the end, I wish someone just said, just stick it in the ground and don't worry about all this detail work.
Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
Searching for my seeds. It's time to get organized.
Anybody that started growing food this year, stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year. I'll go first. I am not going to plant anything else without labeling it, because I did that this year and it was awful. If y'all remember the watermelons, yeah, not doing that again. Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
I am not planting watermelons. They took over, and I don't have a long enough growing season. They're so tempting.
Anybody that started growing food this year, stitch this and...
In addition to labeling my plants, I will also be noting on the label when the plants are ripe for picking. I didn't do that with my tomatoes, and one variety happened to be ripe when it was still green with a tinge of orange. I was watching that plant waiting for all the tomatoes to turn orange, and when they started falling from the plant, which is a natural indication that they're ripe, I went ahead and tried one and found out it was perfectly fine to eat. It was not sour. It was pleasantly sweet, and it had the most amazing flavor. But of course, most of the season had gone by, and I had missed out on so many of those tomatoes because the squirrel knew when they were ripe, but my butt didn't. So I will be putting that on the label.
Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
Yeah, I think next year I'm going to cut back a little bit on the ambition, because I am growing avocado trees in my bathroom because I live in New England. I should probably stick with the crops that grow best in my region.
Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
This. I'm going to contain my watermelon and anything that climbs. This is a forest. There's watermelon in here, and a lot of them, but you...
Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
Never again will I pick up a plant from the side of the street and bring it in with all the rest of my plants. I've been fighting thrips for months.
Stitch this and tell me one thing you're absolutely not doing next year.
I'm going to pick like 2 varieties of tomatoes. Just don't plant like 7 varieties because you're going to hate tomatoes. You're going to not want them anymore.